Well, and then you talked about code switching, which, in the cultural context of today would be, a lot of black folks talk about, hey, we have to do code switching in order to sort of talk and communicate effectively in a white-dominated, different rules of communication and culture, right? So that we talk one way with our own people when we talk a different way with these other folks. And maybe just talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I think there's value in that. Like, if you want a subculture where it's like, even like younger generations will do this, but like racial identity groups, this, like having your own jargon or lingo that feels like insider language, it actually strengthens bonds in a way. Like, we get it, but like the outsiders don't get it.
Well, I mean, this is integral life, right? So we could talk about orange and green and teal, and that's exactly. Talk about an inside language, right? Someone will be like, what the hell are they talking about?
Right. Yeah, we have a lot of jargon in integral spaces that is like shorthand for a lot of things.
So it's an upper left teal phenomena, and when I talk about the state experience as it relates to the stage, and people like that aren't integral say, what did he just say?
What?
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Integral Edge through Integral Life. My name is Keith Martin Smith, and I am the author most recently of When the Buddha Needs Therapy. I work as an executive coach and as a book coach. And I'm pretty excited because today I have an old friend on, Michael Porcelli, who's an educator, facilitator, and a coach of relational communication. He was the former director of curriculum and faculty development at the Integral Center, which was here in Boulder, Colorado. And he's currently the founder of something called MetaRelating. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Keith. Good to be here.
Good to have you on, man.
Yeah.
So today I wanted to get into this idea of the sort of the dying art of skillful communication. And it's something you and I talked about when we ran into each other a few weeks back. And, to state the obvious, we're living in a time when communication is sort of more fractured, and there's obviously the sort of cultural divides around, the left talking to the right and the left or the right talking to the center and all these things. Mm-hmm. But then there's other relational divides, right? Between parents talking to kids, us talking to each other, talking to our partners, our family. There's all kinds of things. And I think because this is such a broad topic and because you've thought about it so deeply and written about it so extensively, the place I want to start, I think, is sort of horizontally with a horizontal cultural view of something I learned a few years back. And I've never forgotten it because it was so interesting and informative to me. And
cool.
It's sort of a crude map, but it was helpful in breaking me out of the way of looking at everything through my particular cultural lens. And so what this person told me, which was really interesting, was that there are essentially four major ways that cultures operate on the planet. You have the kind of modern European, mostly Caucasian point of view, which is direct and unemotional. So I might say, like, Michael, your behavior at that meeting was inappropriate. We need to have a conversation about that, blah, blah. But, direct, unemotional. In Latin American cultures, in African American cultures, it is emotional and direct. So it's like, I'm going to bring the emotional charge and I'm going to come right at you with it, right? And it's a very different flavor. In Eastern cultures, it is indirect and unemotional, so that I'm going to say without any emotion that I'm upset with you without actually being that direct about it, which would be considered rude. And then finally, in Eastern European countries, this is the one that was really confusing to me, but I've definitely experienced it, it's emotional and indirect. So it'll be like, you're not paying your share of the rent, and it's like, I'm actually not mad about the rent at all, but I'm being indirect but emotional. So those four things were very curious to me because being fairly enculturated in this sort of direct but unemotional culture, it really helped me look at some of these other expressions with curiosity rather than judgment.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's like kind of one of these classic 2x2 matrices. Like
exactly.
Direct, indirect, emotional, unemotional. Yeah, I think it's really useful. I mean, I think it points to some degree of the need for curiosity, openness, and humility about other people, especially in interpersonal exchanges. I mean, in contexts that we're in today, the internet has kind of collapsed a lot of these geographical barriers. It was easier to just kind of conform to your culture of origin, your locality in times past, and now, especially if you do business in like a big company or you're traveling for work, I know a lot of that is very common these days, like or just even being on screens with people from teams that are spread across the world. And instead of thinking, oh, that feels weird and maybe rude in some way, or like not how I would do it, but there must be something wrong with that person, instead is to take into account kind of the circumstances that might be different, the context that you're coming from. Like the context awareness, I think, is crucial for skillful communication. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of ways that contexts have collapsed in this world that we're in today, which is, it's part of just the environment that we're in on the internet. But like that, it actually calls us to like pay more attention to context in a world where just getting the viral thing to go like into your feed is like removing all kinds of context. You know what I'm saying? Like I think there's ways that the systems of communication that we have are kind of working to collapse or delete relevant context.
Okay, so let's pause there a little bit, because I want you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I fully tracked that. So let's go back 2005, let's say, and what's changed in 20 years related to that context. Let's just for now. Let's just talk in the West, right? Here we are, the States, Western Europe, etc. Industrialized East, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I mean, a big part is like we went from a slower internet to a faster one, and we got like smartphones instead of dumb phones, and we got into like algorithmically curated feeds instead of the old internet. We kind of had to go find what we wanted and curate our own feeds for ourselves,
right?
And I would say like meetings became, especially during COVID, I mean, Skype was there, but Zoom sort of really made it ubiquitous, and now we're kind of like thrown onto these screens like, here we are, where are you? It's like all different times of the day, perhaps,
right?
That kind of thing. These are some of the structural or systemic things that have changed the context that we're communicating from within.
Right. Okay.
Right. And the context that people are coming from, like, hey, this person is coming in from Netherlands, and they are notoriously on the extreme end of the direct. Like
right. Or Israelis, right? I know I'm friends with a few Israelis. They are definitely very direct in a way that can feel rude to an American.
Right. And if you have people that are kind of used to, if even if you had somebody like on a team, like an English-speaking people, but like a British person and a Dutch person, they would have some degree of like difference in the directness. The Dutch person might be direct in a way that the British person might feel like is rude, right? And perhaps that is a new thing for like more teams to even be built out of just like that's not far of a distance, right? Netherlands to England is not that far of a distance, geographically, but culturally it is further than maybe people really realized. And there's a difference between like traveling and saying like, hey, I'm gonna go to Amsterdam and check it out, if you're living in London or something for fun, like vacation travel, versus kind of like I fire up my Zoom, 3 days a week, and I'm talking to people across.
Or I'm negotiating a $1 billion deal, right?
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
So I mean, like historically, the business world, the Western business world, had a, what would we say? Maybe not sophistication, but they certainly had some awareness of this, right? I certainly know my dad did business in Japan in the 70s, and they were certainly taught, that like, hey, it's a different culture. Don't do this. Do this. This is the way business is done there. So there was an acknowledgement that in order to make deals happen, there had to be some sort of cultural intelligence and education going on, right? So that's this is territory we've been swimming in culturally for quite a while now, right? And there's no problem in in this, and this is a form of kind of meta relating, right? We're talking about, it's 1982 and I'm going to Japan or China and I've learned and studied the culture and the norms and, I'm coming in it because I have a goal in mind, a sort of orange meme goal in mind, but it's to get business, close a deal, make money, walk away with the contract, etc. So it's not so much necessarily about the communication is a means to an end. It's not to get to know someone necessarily, right?
Sure. Yeah. But this kind of we're talking about something like we call it code switching in contemporary lingo, right? Yeah. And it's something that diplomats from, ages past have had to kind of learn, and then a lot of the learning of diplomacy can sometimes take place like in book, textbooks, and if you go to your international relations school or courses or whatever. But ultimately, whatever that is some form of like communicating about how we communicate. Right. Which is itself like a central skill in being able to kind of bridge any difference. Right. Whether it is just a cultural thing or if it's a political thing or if it's a gendered thing or even just different parts of the country. Like the way Midwesterners talk is in the United States, the way Midwesterners talk is very much more indirect versus New Yorkers, right? And
absolutely.
And Californians are even different, and people in the South very different there. And like a lot of times, there is one distinction in international communication that I found in business literature is a difference between like how much the extent of the culture, like high context versus low context is the spectrum, right? How much is assumed that you can kind of pick up on cues. And if you have a high context culture, it's usually really unique and distinct to itself. And the people who all get that code or dialect can communicate very efficiently, but it really makes it harder for outsiders to communicate efficiently. And then people like the Dutch, for example, who are like kind of very early to this international trade thing, like their culture was really low context. So, spell everything out very explicitly was kind of a norm. Now, whether that preceded their kind of like the, Dutch East India Company and like kind of like the early stages of capitalism, international capitalism, or if vice versa, they figured that out as part of like spreading the capitalism, whatever that was, is like they learned, to be able to get pretty specific and explicit about how we're communicating together is actually important for trade. Right. So I think that the cultures with lower context, New York is a Dutch colony and it's relatively lower context. Do you see what I'm saying? It has that historical thing. That's why there's so much more direct, for example.
Right. Right. Well, and then you talked about code switching, which, in the cultural context of today would be, a lot of black folks talk about, hey, we have to do code switching in order to sort of talk and communicate effectively in a white dominated, different rules of communication and culture, right? So that we talk one way with our own people when we talk a different way with these other folks. And maybe just talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I think there's value in that. Like if you want a subculture where it's like, even like younger generations will do this, but like racial identity groups, this like having your own jargon or lingo that feels like insider language, it actually strengthens bonds in a way. Like we get it, but like the outsiders don't get it.
Well, this is integral life, right? So we could talk about orange and green and teal and, that's exactly. Talk about an inside language, right? Someone be like, what the hell are they talking about?
Right. Yeah, we have a lot of jargon in integral spaces that is like shorthand for a lot of things.
So it's an upper left teal phenomena. And, when I talk about the state experience as it relates to the stage, and people are like, that aren't integral say, what did he just say?
What? Yeah. So we can even feel it within the integral community. We actually sort of like having these shortcuts because you can feel like, conversations you and I have had for years. It's like we can go really fast because we have these kind of shortcuts where at some point in the past, probably through reading some Ken Wilber book or something, we kind of like created a mental model, right? With sort of concepts and labels and shorthand for those things. And now when we know, hey, are you into Ken Wilber? I'm into Ken Wilber. Oh, cool. Then we could be like shorthand, speed up, right? We can actually go thought exchange is sort of faster. We may feel a bit more of an interpersonal vibe or connection, like rapport, right? But that also makes the outsider harder for outsiders to get it. And when you kind of don't have it, you're kind of like, okay, cool. So let me, if we've ever explained integral to an outsider person, you're kind of like, okay, let me share with like cultural evolution and psychological development and You're trying to refer to something that they understand. That's always going on. It just pays to really kind of like have that context awareness and your ability to kind of communicate in a way that builds a bridge.
Yep.
Like this applies everywhere. I think of it as like interpersonal diplomacy. If you think about it, it doesn't have to be business deals or international relations. It could just be just between you and another person.
Well,
right?
I want to start culturally, and then I want to move into the individual. So I definitely want to get into personal communication because I have a lot of questions for you around that. But
it just exists at all levels.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I guess there's a truism then, right? That like it's a relatively recent human phenomenon that we have learned about this idea that like being aware that we communicate in a particular way in our culture and sensitive to the fact that other cultures communicate in a different way, and then being able to be attuned and more intelligent in that communication. That's you certainly don't read about that in ancient text, right? There isn't that idea of like, there might be a way of like, how do we communicate these people to get what we want, but not like, how do we communicate these people in order to understand them as well as we can, the way they understand themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, the Babel myth is almost like the source of this. It just sort of acknowledges that kind of happened, right? Like when there are language groups in ancient times that bump into each other, it's like they're making sounds and you don't get. I mean, it really does come down to the level of language, but even within same language groups, right? It's kind of like, oh, there are differences, even though we're all speaking English or some other kind of like
the idioms of the British or the Irish compared to the idioms of the Americans or the Canadians or the South Africans or the Australians, right? There's a lot of idiosyncratic sounding things if you're not part of that particular English speaking group.
Yeah, which is it's kind of fun. It's almost like fun. This turns a phrase like you're like, oh, if you say it this way,
Get the umbrella out of the bonnet. It's like the bonnet. Oh, the bonnet's the trunk, right? Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah. And,
or the boot. Excuse me, the bonnet's the hood. See, I still screwed it up, right? Yeah, the boot, not the bonnet, right?
Yeah, and it can be fun, and I do. I think it's a natural result of just this amount of, you could say all these technological infrastructures, like whatever, trains and then planes and then telephone and radio and television, you know what I mean? It's kind of collapsed the distance such that like we are much more aware of all of these ways that these different subcultures, whether it's developmentally or it's race-based or it's even like the jargon you get in like as an engineer, right? There's engineering jargon, like there's scientific jargon. You kind of, we're like, oh, we're pretty aware of this. Yeah. Right.
And then, so where it slides into more problematic areas, right, is that, you might have something like, again, in Black culture, which is direct and emotional versus Caucasian culture, which is direct and unemotional. Well, that all seems well and good unless you take a job as a Black man for a white-dominated company, and you have to be quite mindful of not being direct and emotional because that might be perceived as being an angry Black man. Or worse, if you get pulled over, you certainly don't want to freely express your emotions to a white police officer. That would probably be very unwise. And so now we can get into like, these are fun to talk about, but then they can also begin to create some very real world problems where it's not just a fun thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I suppose I feel I get that. And when I'm like, well, how do we solve for that? And some people I think naturally want to adapt, right? Like to include, and I think to do that requires some amount of humility, right? Whether, so maybe adapt and include are sort of two sides of the same thing, right? Like if I went to a trip to Hong Kong once and I'm like, I am way out of my element over here. You know what I mean? Even though you can get away with a lot of English in Hong Kong, it's still just way different, right? It's like, whoa, okay. I feel like I'm on another planet almost. This is incredible, right? Like,
I felt that way in
So
Thailand. In Thailand, I felt genuinely alien, you know.
yeah, yeah. But like, did you experience some degree of like, all right, it would serve me here to like have a little bit of humility,
Oh, for
a little bit of
sure.
curiosity, a little bit of
Absolutely.
like
I mean, or if you
help,
want to have
help.
any experiences but your own, yeah. I mean, you know, I mean, like if you want to try to lean into their reality a little bit, yeah, it's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you end up having these weird little meta communication things like, hey, how do you say this? Or hey, what did that mean right there? Or like, is this cool? Like, you try to kind of get somebody who will be kind of like on the other side of that relation, the includer, a local, people who work in hospitality, like at hotels and resorts, are like taught to do this, right? They're kind of
Yeah.
doing this kind of slightly diplomatic
Right.
job, right? But you want to be, and then if you're an includer, you're in, and I think we sometimes find ourselves in either role. It's like, okay, help me get, where you're coming from, your kind of context. Like when I worked at Hewlett Packard here in San Diego, we had a lot of people from Singapore. We had a lot of people from Spain, Barcelona. And, we had smattering of like, British and English people, Irish people, but a lot of just Americans. And even the Americans kind of were ranging from like, white middle class kind of Midwest style Americans to kind of like, Hispanics and blacks. And, it was an interesting, diverse mix of folks. And I found, sometimes just over lunch, it would be kind of helpful. Like, hey, what are some things that are funny about being here? If you're from Spain, and now you're doing engineering here and you do engineering in Spain, like what are some interesting ways that this is different, right? Like
Right.
and it can feel risky, like I'm going to put my foot in my mouth or something, or I might accidentally trip up. But I think there is a way of like, there is a certain risk, right? Like to be curious and humble if you're adapting, or to be sort of like inclusive, right? You might actually step on a toe and say something that you kind of regret. But like, I don't know how else these bridges get built besides people who are kind of like willing to kind of lean in on either side of that, adapt, include relationship, and like help educate each other or help learn about each other, and
Right.
like help
Right.
create.
Well, it starts with that humility that we're talking about, right? That you said, just
Yeah.
of like not presuming that the way that me and mine communicate is the only intelligent, nuanced way to communicate.
Exactly.
Right. Now, when we travel, it gets thrown in our face, to your point, right? In a way that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Thailand people are not direct at all. I mean, not at all. That was like completely maddening when I first got there. And then it's like, okay, like, I have to, I can be frustrated, or I can try to adapt and learn how to communicate in this culture that's going to make sense to them and not make them uncomfortable. And I guess that's all true in the, in the subcultures that we have in this country, to your point, the way people communicate in Boulder or the South Bay, with nonviolent communication. I mean, the first time I heard nonviolent communication, I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" Right? I'm feeling uncomfortable with the expression of your intensity. And I was like, "What do you just be direct? What are you talking about?" Right? It's like I just wanted to smash him in the face. Coming from Philly, coming from that East Coast, like, man, just tell me straight. What are you protecting? So even here we have these microclimates and ways of communication that, I think are more developmental. Certainly nonviolent communication from an integral perspective, we would say was sort of a green meme technology, post-rational, can see these things we're talking about, can see the meta context of communication quite clearly, and use that as a construct to change the communication process itself to ideally create less conflict and more clarity. But it doesn't work if only one person is doing it and the other person has no idea what's going on, right? Then it just generates confusion, contempt, judgment. Those are all the risks. So you've created a whole meta-relating technology that's, obviously from an integral space. What have you done? What are you addressing? And how does it avoid falling into this pitfall of like, I'm going to talk to you in a way that I can see the context, but I don't confuse the shit out of you by doing it.
Yeah. Well,
or irritate you.
I mean, I do like. I think I want to just say like it is inevitable to some degree that you're gonna do things like flub a thing or
Sure.
stick your foot in your mouth or whatever. Like it is actually part of the territory. Like I said, the humility to be willing to take a risk and to say something. And just orienting, just to talk about this high and low context thing once more is like
Yeah.
each high context subculture, right? That has a lot of its own like implicit norms and jargon, like the Japanese. You can
Sure.
pick another high context one. They will have a very hard time, even though they're both high context. The contexts are very distinct from each other. So in order to build a bridge, you actually have to go into kind of a lower context, more explicit mode of talking. That's in order for you to kind of build, like, what did you mean by that? What did that mean? I thought that you thought this. Okay. Oh, I was mistaken. Okay. Thanks for correcting me. Right. It's like building that bridge requires that you kind of pop out into kind of like a lower context mode of communicating.
Right. Let me pause you there because it brings something up. So maybe one of the things that I have found and continue, frankly, to find so irritating about nonviolent communication is that it doesn't pause to get a buy-in, a reality check from me. It doesn't, in essence, ask me like, hey, I'm speaking in an unusual way. Is this making sense to you? And it'd be like, no, what are you doing? What's going on here? Help me understand what your goal is.
Yeah. I did a lot of nonviolent communication practice and I do love it a lot. And I do think it is a very distilled kind of compact communication model.
Yeah.
But I think in service of making it very compact, it kind of left out some things that I think are important. And one of the things that is key in MetaRelating and in other practices I found that include this, and not all of them do, most of them actually don't. It's why I call it relational communication, is because you're thinking from the point of view of the relationship itself, right? I call it the relational paradigm. You can think of the relationship is itself on its own entity. It's like a transpersonal entity that we are within and participating in, right? So it's like you and me and our relationship. It's actually a 3-part thing.
Which would say that this would only work for people that were at a minimum at a rational stage of development, because you have to be able to see that there's me and you, and then there's a third entity that's us, that we're co-creating, right? And at Amber, you can't see that. I am the relationship.
Right. Yeah. In that sense, in an Amber culture, the norms are so uniform and accepted, right? From and unconscious, right? It's there. Maybe we could sort of look at it from an integral point of view and say, like, yeah, they're interacting through that Amber value meme, and that culture is, when you talk about a group, culture really is that third entity, right? And when you're talking about a pair, there's one that's specific to you and me. Our personal history, Keith, like our relationship has its own context, and families kind of have that too. If you grow up with a couple of siblings and mom and dad, you kind of get your own little weird family way of talking, that feels like.
Well, I mean, look at your background, right? You're Mexican and Italian, right? So like you're raised in America and a much more socially intelligent, family oriented way than a lot of us were, because those are both more sort of family oriented cultures compared to, say, like a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant or whatever else, where it's a little bit more distant.
More distant, more impersonal. In some ways. So I think asking, so this is a mindset shift, first of all, is to think in terms of like both points of view. I actually sometimes think of it as like there are two different ways of looking at it. If you've ever seen that kind of face and vase optical illusion thing or whatever, it's like there's you and me, and you can look at it, oh, that's two people. And they define the shape of the vase. But you can say, hey, that's a vase. And that sort of defines the shape of the two people. And it's kind of like, yes, they're both valid. They're totally compatible, but they are a background foreground thing.
So in other words, like we're both creating the culture between us that we're talking about, and it's creating us at the same time. Would that be another way?
And it's creating us. Yeah. And it does require a little bit of humility. Like, I mean, it's kind of one way I kind of sometimes put it, like a hot take, and be like, nobody me and you included, we cannot fully understand or control any relationship that we're a part of.
Thank
Right?
God.
Yeah. I mean, but we sometimes behave as though, oh, like I really get it and you don't. Or like I really want to control this to make it
All
satisfy
right.
my needs.
Okay.
You know what I'm
So
saying? Right? It's like
totally,
it kind
totally. So, okay. So again, you've developed this technology. So, obviously, communication goes off the rails for all of us, right? And sometimes the things we care about the most, right? Our most intimate relationship, or things that are most important to us. And we're trying to relay, and what we want to be heard and seen, and it, something happens between the communication, and suddenly this third thing you're talking about kind of disappears, and we're each basically talking to some projected version of ourselves, and the other person is no longer part of this we space, right? So that, to me, that's how I understand, like, when shit goes south, and you're left like, wow, there's no shared reality. What do we do?
Yeah. What do we do? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when when you lose that ability to have that whatever higher order or higher dimensional perspective on what's going on, then it becomes you're relating to your idea of me more than you're relating to the actual me. And I'm relating to my idea of you more than I am relating to the actual you.
Exactly. So what do we do?
Yeah. There's a lot you got to be able to do. I mean, it is an exercise in perspective taking. This is where I think, integral and relational stuff are just like two peas in a pod in a way, right? Like you said this term shared reality, and I think it's a very rich term. We've been talking about it in our relational circles for a long time, and now it's kind of in the public discourse, like, oh, the breakdown in shared reality. And
Sure.
It really includes, it's a little bit geeky here. It's not just, what I think is true, but it's also what I believe I know about what you think is true. Right? And saying vice versa. It's our beliefs about reality, and it's our beliefs about other people's beliefs about reality. Like, how much on the same page are we or aren't we? And in order to increase the shared reality, I actually need to, you could say, I need to fill in my map of reality with more data that is kind of like, okay, Keith, this is what Keith thinks happened. This is how Keith was feeling. Oh, Keith woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning, or whatever. Now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm filling in something. Otherwise, we kind of collapse down to, we think, oh, I'm good. I'm a good people person, or I can pick up on clues, but we will continually commit what's called the fundamental attribution error, which is kind of like, hey, for me, when things are off, there's a good explanation over here having to do with the circumstances, right? I stuck in traffic or whatever. But like, when you seem like you're off, then it's like, that's a flaw in your character. Like, and that's actually a bias that everybody kind of has, right? Like, when it's me, I give myself the benefit of the doubt because I'm including more, but it makes sense, right? Because you are more aware of your own circumstances than other people often are. So you can
be more empathetic towards yourself, hopefully.
Yes. Right. So the idea here is like, in order to get in there, especially when things are going off, is to be like, oh, okay, this is the moment when maybe it's the hardest thing to do, but it's probably the more important thing to do is for me to be like, help me understand what this was like from your point of view.
Okay.
And then let me be receptive to that so that I can update my perspective to include yours.
Okay. So let's make it real then. You ready to get into it?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Here we go.
So
is this going to get personal?
I won't get rude, I promise. Not too rude. No. So you're having a disagreement with, your significant other, right? And so there's like I think there's a good truism to, like, what you feel can't be wrong and what you experience can't be wrong, right? So like, you and I could be talking and I could get really mad, and the experience could be, wow, I feel Michael's being really condescending towards me and it's really pissing me off. And it's like, the feelings and the experience by definition can't be wrong because they're happening, right? So it's like, there's no point in being like, well, no, you don't feel angry, or no, you're not experiencing that. Obviously you're experiencing that. Obviously you're angry, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now the problem there is that you're not intending to be condescending towards me. And there's a missing piece there. So if you and I are having conflict and I say, look, man, like, Jesus Christ, you're being fucking condescending towards me and it's pissing me off, you know?
Yeah.
How do you get out of now what could be a cycle of, hey, that's not what I'm not being confrontational. Like, you need to take it down. And suddenly, right, shared reality is gone, right? We're both sort of arguing from our like, I'm wrong, no, you're wrong kind of a place.
Yeah. I mean, there's no simple, like, you know, push this button and then you kind of get there, you know.
Sure.
Part
I mean, how would you work with that situation? Yeah. Like what would you do if I really was authentically in that place, right? I just got all pissed off at you, right? And it really clearly is a projection.
Yeah. Okay. So if that was just happening between the two of us,
yeah,
I would be like, all right, Keith, sounds like you think I was being condescending and like you weren't liking that. And I'm not sure how I was being condescending. And I want you to help me understand what it is that I did or said that had you come to that conclusion.
Yeah. So
that's
there's
curiosity.
So you need
it helps me understand you better.
You need to really step out of your own. You need to make sure that your system is regulated.
Yes.
Right. So in other words, if what I say really pisses you off, then what would you do?
If I notice that, like, oh, I can't.
Yeah. It's like, wow, he just really pissed me off by accusing me of being condescending.
To say something like that, I would be like, okay, Keith, yeah, I hear you, and now I'm feeling angry. Can I just pause to gather my thoughts?
Okay.
Before we keep talking. Right? That's just, I mean, at a certain point, you could say my wherewithal or my surplus capacity just disappears entirely. I can't access it, at which point I probably would just be like, well, fuck you. Right? Like, we were just like, now we're arguing, right? Like, which is fine. I mean, I actually have gone down this road and, you know, I've got a brother and we've argued in the past. And sometimes we've actually kind of stumbled into ways of like breaking out of the like at that point it's like you're in a pattern, you're kind of doing a thing,
right?
You're almost doing one of these things where like I'm not having fun and you're not having fun. I don't like this and you don't like this, but we're still doing it, right? You know, and maybe somebody just like, you know, stands up and walks away. I mean, the one that my brother found that like worked for us was he would just be like, shut the fuck up, and I would just be like, I can do that, okay.
Well, okay. So to me, you're getting at something. So I mean, like I do a fair amount of work with couples and help them with communication. It's part of why I'm asking you, right? And it's like what I try to share with them is that, you know, this important thing, feelings and experiences can't be wrong, and then this idea of can you get to a shared reality around what happened? Because otherwise, it's very hard to talk about kind of what to do about it. And so someone has to sort of lay their guns down first, so to speak, you know, or like your brother, you know, maybe has to tell you to shut the fuck up and leave the room, get regulated, get out of a triggered state, right, and come back. And then it's like, okay, I was triggered, I was a little hot, I'm resourced now, so I have the capacity to actually communicate more clearly. So that's obviously number one, is we have to be resourced.
Yeah, to some degree. You don't have to be like abundantly resourced, like I need to go to a spa, get some body work.
But you can't have smoke coming out of your ears.
What's that?
You can't have smoke coming out of your ears, right?
You can't have smoke coming out of your ears, right? All that matters is you get it. I mean, there is a little bit of it, you know, like whatever, rock climbing, you find that little grip. That's enough. I know I can pull myself up with that amount of, you know, you maybe have to kind of like, okay, you know, where can I get a toe hold or something? Cool. If you cool off enough, right? So I just want to like say, in the end, a lot of these solutions look like we created something custom for us. If you're sort of talking about the interpersonal level and there's like a longevity to the relationship. Yeah. Like business partners or best friends or intimate partners or a family system, right? It's kind of like, all right, what do we do that works for us, that helps us? But the function is still the same, right? Like, oh, we're both blown out. What's a pattern interrupt that like helps us like disengage, right? Disengage is the goal,
that's a really good point, because I have like in my current relationship, we have a particular way of stopping conflict that's very different from previous relationships that I've been in. Yeah. Right. It just because where we get tangled up is different than I got tangled up with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Totally. Totally.
So it's
And
like,
you'll
oh,
feel,
now we're tangled up. I know to pull the thing. She knows to pull the thing. We pop out of the
yeah.
disagreement. We
Yeah.
reconnect, and then it's like, okay, great. And it doesn't hardly takes any time at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the a kind of common example of this that especially gets established when you're going into intense situations on purpose is like a safe word, right? This would be kind of like, I say whatever, bubbles. And
Yeah.
that just means
Yeah.
we pre-agreed.
My safe word is
stop.
fuck you. Never works. I don't know why.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's say we've gotten enough de-escalate. And I will say, at least for me, you know, sometimes it really does not take that long. Like, hey, go for a walk around the block and I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Sure.
Or I can even just sit here in the same room as you, depending on who it is, you know, and be like, take a few deep breaths, and maybe 2 minutes later I could be like, all right, let's start this again. You know what I mean? Like it's different depending on the person and the circumstance and so forth, but it's good to kind of get to know your person and what they need to like do the thing. But once you're there, then let's just say you're kind of like, you're not in the red zone, but you're still, I don't know, I'm pretty activated still.
Right.
Let's get into it. Right. And at that point, there is, you know, this thing we've called like the weaving shared reality, right? You can imagine almost like an infinity symbol, right? Between the two of you, and like in one dynamic, it's like, Keith, you're revealing what's going on for you, and I am just simply understanding it. My goal in that dynamic is to just understand you as best as I can in your terms. And that requires that I sort of confirm with you understanding. It's partly what makes it shared reality. Did I get that right? Am I missing something?
Right.
Is it
right? And they're so right. That's such a valuable thing that's so easy to step past. And we have a question here. Let me throw it in here. It's really relevant from Judy. She said,
cool.
I'm operating currently on the assumption that when I'm triggered, I have the opportunity to heal the wound that caused it by courageously allowing myself to feel the pain as much as possible. So I practice feeling comfortable with discomfort. So, I mean, I guess that's a statement more than a question. So,
Sure.
I mean, I guess that's what we're touching on a little bit here too, is that often if we're getting triggered, it has to do with childhood stuff, can often, right? It's like, you know, you raise your voice in a way that really irritates me because of, you know, something my dad did when I was 6 or whatever, right? So it just makes it more complicated. More reason to go more slowly, more reason to get shared reality.
Yes. Yeah. I think I understand this perspective and I value it. Like, I just want to say, like, somebody who does their work to understand, the kinds of things that trigger me and the ways that perhaps those patterns got installed very early on, and to do that kind of healing work to integrate those parts better, and you'll be less prone to being triggered even when the circumstances don't really change all that much. You could be like, you know, 5 years ago, that shit really, you know, sent me through the roof. And now, you know, you're basically still doing the same shit, dude. But I'm fine, you know, because I went and handled it, right? Like, this is good. However, I think there is a way in the transformational world, you could say therapy culture, coaching culture, all this, where things actually, they stay in the face's point of view to individuals doing their work. This is not, sometimes you'll hear people say this, right? I'm projecting, this is more about me than it is about you. This is more about my ex-girlfriend or my mom or whatever than it is about what's happening here. And I need to, whatever, you know, and like, and it almost becomes like a weird new norm in transformational culture, where it's like, you know, maybe early on it's kind of great because you're actually developing some connection. You're like, oh, cool. My person is letting me know a little bit about how this pattern got installed with their parent. And like,
well, there's ownership, right? So it's like, I'm not really mad at you. I'm mad at mom. And which is like, oh, okay, well, thanks. That de-escalates it for me.
It can de-escalate it. Yes. And that's good. However, I think it is like reductive to the individual, and it loses that. It loses connection with the what does the relationship need? If the relationship is its own entity,
which it is
to some degree,
agreed.
It is about us, right? It is about you. It is about me.
Sure.
right? If I'm saying like, oh, you're triggered with me, well, that's your business, not my business. You go do your work and I'll be here when you come back. It's like, no,
So
no, that's incomplete is what I'm saying. That is
no, that
incomplete.
makes sense because by definition, that trigger that I've identified as mine is going to live between us as long as that's an active trigger. And you're going to be experiencing it as long as it's an active trigger. Even if I own it in the moment, right? It's like, that's still, it's basically, it's a landmine in the relationship.
Yeah. Right. And my healing work, some of these things are kind of like, oh wow, that thing popped up again. I haven't seen that one in a long time. Like I thought I addressed that in therapy like a decade ago. And sometimes it happens, but like, you know,
It's a little too close to the bone there, Michael.
but you can totally see how like maybe early on it was like, oh wow, right, she's really letting me into her past and letting me know, right? But then it's like, okay, but we've been together 5 years now, and that thing happens again, and she's like, yeah, it's that thing about my dad, and da 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 da, and I'm like, yeah, I heard that already, like I heard that.
And what about me?
Already,
and what about
right?
us?
Like, what about what we're gonna do about that now and going forward? At which point it's like talking about my healing process, about my relationship with my parents is one solution, but it may actually be at some point in the development of your relationship just insufficient. Kind of just like,
let's park the car there for a moment, because I've been in Boulder for 18 years, right? And it's like, and I've definitely been in some relationships, people that were going to Naropa, really steeped in nonviolent communication. And to your point where it was like, what would I say? It was like an excuse in some ways. Like, well, what do you expect me to do? This is a trigger. This is because this X happened in my childhood. It's like, well, what I expect you to do is stop doing it. That's what I expect you to do, because it sucks to be on the receiving end of it, especially after a half hour of Marshall Rosenberg nonviolent communication that owns it. But it's like, but then it happens again 3 days later. So it's like, it's exhausting.
Yeah, it can be. This is the kind of idea that you're sort of like over processed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I would say that we're in a moment in those subcultures, right? Here's a subculture, right? You and I know this subculture. There's a lot of it in California. There's a lot of it in Europa, and there's these little pockets in different places. Yep. Austin maybe has a little bit of this too. It's okay, what is that? It's like we say, hey, the right answer or the good answer or what's going to be good for our relationship is to really kind of like trot that stuff out. Let's talk about it, and the feeling and the value and the past and the trigger and the trauma and the response and the healing and the this. And it's like, yes, that's good. That's good for our relationship. And like, I have now started to question this norm as being actually healthy as the predominant way of dealing with it.
Because your point is that it's good to a point. And that
Yes.
we're better off knowing that than not knowing it, right? Because otherwise, I don't know why I'm blowing my top when someone does something, right? It's like, okay, so now I found out I'm blowing my top because mom did something to me when I was 7. Great. Your point is, okay, now Keith, do the effing work, and like it's up to you to metabolize that wound and to own it. It's not your spouse's or your partner's burden to co-carry with you.
Yes. Right. Yeah, totally. And in a way, it's like, what if you think of a relationship as like a dynamic, or maybe it's like a set of dynamics, right? It'd be like, hey, like what I want with my intimate partner is something that is like, it's like Argentine tango. This is the dynamic, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to go to the Argentine tango class and we're going to learn the Argentine tango moves. Yeah. And if I keep showing up with like a baseball and a baseball glove and being like, here, let's play catch. You might be, well, I can play catch with you, right? But now we're playing baseball, right? And it's like, well, maybe we want one. I mean, I imagine there's plenty of therapists out there who have intimate relationships with other therapists, and maybe they like to some degree to do this, right? Which is fine. But the question is like, even if it's voluntary, even if I'm like, yeah, I want to talk about my past healing things, and you're kind of like, I'm really curious. Let me hear more about that. I'm like, cool. The roles that we are now in is something like, you are the empathic, unconditional, accepting and understanding presence, and I am the person who's doing a healing process. And you're like, that's a dynamic. right? The healer and the healee. You know what I'm saying? That's sort of like the pitcher and the catcher in baseball. And you're kind of like, well, that was nice. We're actually getting better at doing that sort of thing. You might even be getting better at doing that thing with each other, but then you're sort of like, yeah, but why is this not hot anymore? And I'm like, that's because you stopped going dancing and doing Argentine tango. And you're kind of like, wow, but I really loved it. It really has to do with like, what are the habits of the dynamic? What are the patterns that you're repeating?
Right.
Is that what you want the relationship to be?
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Because I would argue that for most people, certainly in my experience, most of the people I've known, overprocessing is by nature depolarizing. And speaking generally, a good relationship, a strong relationship, has a fair amount of polarity in it, regardless of the genders and sexes of the people involved, right? There's a crackle, right? That's part of what makes it like, oh, that's an interesting thing. It's a little more of the Argentinian tango, right? Versus baseball, versus softball, let's say.
Sure.
And I should say maybe the 5 p.m., post-work beer belly softball version of softball.
Sure. Or Watson or whatever.
Yeah. So like one of the things that I had modeled for me by my Zen teacher was that, just watching him interact with his wife, but he would put sort of a hard window on their processing time. Would be like, okay, like, well, something's up. And, we have a half hour to process it, maybe 40 minutes if it's really hot, but then I'm going to actually like sort of close the container and we can pick it back up tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I observed that seemed to keep a lot of crackle in their relationship because he was willing to walk away with them not having come to a resolution, with there still being conflict between them, but staying in his heart, staying in the relationship, staying in the loving embrace, and staying in the mess, and saying like, okay, and this time tomorrow we'll pick it up again. Hopefully we can get through it. And so I found that sort of inspirational personally. Yeah,
totally. I mean, it's right in line with a lot of the things that I recommend when people are kind of like, all right, this is more than just being there to heal, right? And like you're saying, depolarization becomes less interesting, or might be less boring, or less sizzle, or less crack, or less fun, right? Like, and it's inevitable, right? This is central to my model in MetaRelating, is this idea of tension. Tension is neither good nor bad. One way of thinking about it is like a bowstring on a musical instrument or an archer, right? It's kind of like, hey, it's potential energy. And like the goal of processing it should, like, you can't not process it. It's sort of like, but what are we doing when we're processing it? Am I turning you into my therapist so that I can go to my inner child and heal it? Or are we trying to convert this tension into something like, oh, wait a minute, we can like create a new Argentinian dance move here. You know what I mean? Whoa, right? Like that.
Right. Right. What's the purpose of doing it? Right. Is it so we don't have conflict because I'm terrified of conflict?
Right.
Right.
Well, right. Yeah.
Conflict can be good. Conflict can create crackle if you do it right.
Totally.
Tension. I mean, like in your metaphor, conflict is the potential energy of that bowstring, correct?
Exactly. Tension. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I would argue that we want that creative energy. We want that chi, right, in our lives, because you can move stuff, right? If there's no tension in the bow, the arrow can't go anywhere by definition.
Right. Totally. And that is part. If there's too much polarity, it's like the interplay between like similarity and difference. You could be like, let's just find the differences and like amplify those differences. And some people tolerate a lot of that. They kind of have the like explosive fight and then like hot makeup sex or something in a relationship.
Which just seems exhausting on the other side of the spectrum for me, right?
Right. And then there's
too much processing on one side, too much explosive fighting and fucking on the other side. It's like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. Too much resonance, too much same can just get kind of boring and sleepy, and too much yang and too much difference, too much polarity can feel like this is too chaotic. My safety system needs something more, and each person is unique, right? And when you're thinking about what you need in a relationship, it's good to be aware of your own historical context, your developmental context, your own wounding, what you need. But I think everybody needs some in column A and some in column B. Some amount of difference and tension is what you need, because it's like it would be like dating like an AI clone of yourself. It's like, I don't want more of me. You know what I'm saying? At a certain point, it's like,
It's
no,
like
I
that
don't
old
want you.
Seinfeld joke, he's like, I don't want to date me. I can't stand me. After he like dates the woman that's just like him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like we even got this whole news cycle with Chat GPT being too sycophantic.
Oh
Like
my
it's
God.
like,
Yeah.
fuck you, Chat GPT. You're always agreeing with me. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right on. You're totally right. I am
You're
agreeing
brilliant
with
for
you.
seeing that. Yeah.
You're brilliant, right? And just like, what do you do, right? Like,
Yeah. It's like a therapist who never challenges you. It's just like, yes, well,
exactly.
your brilliance has seen that you have trauma. It's like, well, yes, I know that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
I feel like I feel satisfied in the relational realm here.
Fun.
I want to take a step back because I know that you work with companies and you work with sort of cultures on a bigger scale. And what would I say? It's like all these things, obviously, if they exist at home, they exist at work, right? They just exist in a different way, a different frequency. And so, when you're working with leaders, corporate leaders and corporate cultures, how do these principles apply there? And what's different and what's the same?
Oh, that's interesting. More is the same than you might realize.
That
It's
doesn't
kind of
surprise me. Yeah.
at the content level, it's different, right? We're maybe talking about projects or how we arrange our work together, like this kind of a thing. The types of interactions we think are really healthy. This is kind of like, how do you design the relationship? And some of this stuff sort of ends up in, well, what project management system we're using, which is kind of just whatever corporate IT stuff. But on the other hand, you're like, well, we want a tool that's going to enhance our ability to have communication, transparency, accuracy. Like there is a way. It's like, hey, if we're all bought into this is the way we're going to get our work done, the how, right? Then we are all like maintaining that whatever this is. It cashes out in many ways. Like it's like, what's the vision? What's the strategy for this?
Well,
this
where do you see companies going sideways, like culturally? Like what's a common theme where they get, sort of tripped up in communication in a corporate or a business environment?
I think there's a number of different ways that this happens. I think there is, the culture thing is interesting because like early when it's small,
Right.
this idea of hiring for culture fit is good. It is a little bit like, hey, we just get along really well. We have a lot of shared background. We would make good partners. And early on, that's good. You can actually rely on a lot of implicit stuff.
Because there's only 8 people in the company or 10 people in the company. So
exactly. And then you can almost have like this vibe. And then you're kind of like, yeah, we want this. And it's like one of the issues is trying to actually scale culture fit too far in a way, because then culture fit becomes a little bit culty. Like you've seen these kind of like corporate cultures.
I've seen startups do it where they get to a point and it's like, oh, the unique sauce that makes Zappos or makes whatever is this thing. So now we're going to strain everybody through it. And then it starts to feel like, it feels a little weird in this office, right? It's like, what the hell is going on with you all?
Yes. There's like this weird conformity. Are people really into this? Or are they just kind of going through the motions? You know what I mean? And it's like culture is good and it never is going to go away entirely. But like that, there's a difference between, founders, CEOs have more influence on what a culture is than most of the other people in the organization. Sure. However, if they get in their mind that they can kind of like dictate what the culture is from the top down, you lose something essential about what culture actually is. Like culture is an aggregate thing, right? It is. Remember how I said that you can't fully understand any relationship that you're in? Well, you can't fully understand any culture that you're in either, and you can't control it either. The culture is an emergent thing based on all the norms and interactions and patterns of the ways people are doing it. It doesn't mean you should just be like, well, screw it, I'm not going to pay any attention to culture. It's recognizing that culture is continually in a dialogue with itself, and a healthy culture has the channels for, hey, how do we incorporate these differences? Like there at some point, higher number 30 or 50 or whatever is going to be like, we're hiring this person because they're really darn good at the thing that we need them for. But they may not really fit this vibe of, I don't know. Like in tech, it's like
it's a bank. It's a bank versus
growth or whatever.
It's a bank versus a startup, right? It's like the cultures are, on the surface and to some degree of depth, very different.
Yes.
Right. And for good reason.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that someone disruptive can never work for a bank or someone very square can't work for a startup, right? And I think your whole point here is that founders, small companies get into trouble when the founders try to control something that is inherently uncontrollable. And yet they do have some degree and some responsibility to be stewards of that culture. It's just a matter of to what degree that, since you can't control it fully, but you need to be mindful of it to some extent.
Yep.
I don't want to walk into my bank and see a bunch of like dudes with long hair and beards, wearing like cut off jeans. It's like, I don't think I'm digging the vibe here for this bank. For
doing a little parade. Right. Yes. What are you guys doing? Totally. Yeah. So I think another interesting mistake that happens is like some leaders will be like, all right, I get it. Help me not try to like dictate the culture, but also not ignore it, and help me be a better listener. Like help me be a person who's more understanding. And like, that's kind of good. I would say developmentally, maybe at first people go like, we want to have a culture of feedback, which means I am open to your feedback. And here's a common mistake would be kind of like, all right, a person goes, well, I have some feedback. And they go, great, I'm all ears. You tell me all about it, right? The CEO or whatever. They're kind of like, and then the person goes like, well, when you said this, I was confused or I didn't like it because this is what I thought was going on. Like I didn't like that. What's up with that? And then if the first thing that the leader says is like something like, oh, thank you for your input. Let me explain to you how that wasn't what I intended. If that's the first thing out of your mouth, you are a terrible listener. You are basically saying like, you have now told me how my actions did not have the intended impact that I intended. So now I'm going to tell you what my intention was so that now you can just not have that impact anymore. Right? If I explain myself, you should feel different. You will feel different once I explain myself.
Right, because you obviously, if you did this in an intimate relationship, it would sound a little weird, right? If it's like the projection thing I said earlier, I'm really mad at you because you're condescending. And if you were like, let me explain why I'm not being condescending to you. My head would blow up, right? And I'd be like, you're doing it again.
You're doing it right now. Right. But like it, so it's at some level, it is, explaining intentions are totally valid. To me, it's sort of like there's an art to being able to do this, right? It's kind of like, actually, you might be interested in what I intended after I'm like, oh, so you didn't like it because you thought this. And I can even say things like, I could see how you would think that, or like, that makes sense. So, okay, help me out. Like, and once I kind of get it, you're satisfied, you're de-escalated.
Okay, so give the same example, give the CEO that's worked with you, what's he going to say?
The CEO that, let's say they've just really kind of got it for real at a deeper level, then they will essentially basically repeat back their understanding, paraphrasing or whatever, just affirming that person's experience from their perspective was valid.
I'm hearing you say that you didn't get what I said or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And confirming that your understanding is accurate. So you're kind of giving that. When you say something like, hey, am I getting you? Am I understanding you accurately? I'm like allowing you to essentially tell me whether my perspective matches what you're into. And like, okay, at some point,
shared reality. We're back to shared reality.
Yes. There will be more shared reality. And oftentimes, I'll even coach the executive kind of like, just wait then. You don't need to end the conversation. But chances are, I've seen this happen so many times, is once a person really feels like you're getting them, then they'll be like, yeah, you got me. And if you just wait, they'll go, so what was going on? What was going on for you? Like, why'd you do what you did then? Like, you totally get me now. Like, it's almost like there's a natural interest, not 100% of the time, but it happens quite quite a bit. And it's surprising how often we'll have the person will be like, now, and they're kind of saying like, please explain to me what you intended to do. Like which is, you're kind of like, yay, I get to do it now.
Right. But the difference is that they ask for it rather than being told it. So
100%.
they have, that makes a lot of sense, because it seems like that's really foundational to what you're teaching and developing here in MetaRelating, is this idea of what will we say, sort of, I hate to use the word consent because it sounds like somehow implies sex, but I mean, like, I'm always wanting to, the more I can reality test and get your consent for the stages of my trying to understand the conflict, the more likely we are to resolve the conflict and come to that shared understanding.
Yep. Totally. Then there's a sort of a advanced level kind of failure that happens. Let's say somebody works with me and they're like, I get this. This is great. Right. Then they almost become like the diplomat. They're like, hey, that guy, he's really good at listening. He's really good at smoothing things over. He's almost like the Switzerland of the workplace. You can even develop a reputation like this, right? That's the trustable leader, right? And you can, sometimes that person is sort of in the middle, right? You maybe have like the top level executives are kind of like doing their thing, and all the workers are kind of doing their thing, and you kind of have this like mid-level manager.
It could be like a chief of people or an HR person or something, right?
Yeah. And this is tricky because that person's like, yeah, I did that training and I learned how to become a great communicator, and like, no wonder people really want to come to me because I'm the one that can like mediate these things and make it work. All of which is good, except at a system level, they've become a bottleneck.
Say more.
Now it's like we need that person in order to, like, oh, let's bring in so and so, right? And now they become stretched thin, and maybe they're unable to prioritize other business needs besides being the mediator. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's not talk about this until so and so is here. I've been in an organization where somebody had just like such extraordinary relational powers. A lot of talking about like what was going on in the organization or what to do next would not really even happen until that person was there. And
which
now
gets in the way of doing business, I presume.
Yes.
And so there's a healthy part where it's like, hey, look, we need to get the job done. There's shit going on between us, but let's put it aside and take care of X. And so that would be part of what you would help. Part of what you're helping companies see is to develop a culture that allows a healthy bypass, for one. That's the like, hey, we're not going to process today. Let's kick it down the street and let's just get back into doing what we're doing. But then two, I would imagine your point is that you try to teach the culture-wide adoption of what that brilliant facilitator listener is doing. Because if more people can do what he or she are doing at different levels of the organization, then the bottleneck would begin to disappear.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of decentralized. Like, keep the processing of the tensions as local as possible, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like, it's not to say escalating is never necessary or the right thing, but I think there has in recent years become almost like a norm, right? Like a report, kind of like the way that university administrations, at least by some accounts, have become like almost like overbearing parents, right? And it's kind of like, and then students are like, step one, tell on them. Right? Step one, right? It's like, you're feeling uncomfortable. Step one, go find an authority.
Go to mom and dad and telling them. That's right. Yeah.
Right? Like, and it's like, that is not good for a culture. Like, because it keeps people in a perpetual state of like, it is like children. And believe me, people do.
Very disempowered. It's like, you can't take care of the problem yourself. You have to appeal to authority.
Yes. And employees do sometimes get into this almost like they relate with management in a parental dynamic. Sure. I don't want to. It feels uncomfortable for me. It's above my pay grade. I'm just going to go, tell the manager to go do something about this, and then the manager to come follow. And I would say to some degree, this is functional, right? It's like you are a part-time mediator to your direct reports if you're in a traditional management hierarchy, and that's okay, right? But the idea, like at the whole organization level, a cultural level, to make it normal to be able to do this kind of communication and to give people access to the education and training to do it.
Right.
Right. Then it's like, okay, sometimes when we escalate, it's kind of like, oh, we really do need to bring in the big guns because this is a big issue.
Right.
Not kind of like, come on, just go talk to the person. You don't need me to step in. This is a small thing. Right. It's like, and then the ones that escalate are truly become the ones that are important. And now you're kind of having like overall a healthier system of processing tensions. Make sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that this is how you scale the work that you do. So that you could work for, obviously, like if it's an 8-person company, that's gonna be a cakewalk for you. But working for an 800-person company, well, that's a whole degree of complexity because you have, to your point from earlier, you've got microcultures arising within the culture. You have different ethnic groups that have different subcultures themselves, different intelligences, different developmental capacities, different perspectives, different traumas, different presumptions. I mean, it's suddenly the complexity is almost off the scale of comprehensibility, right? It's like at just 800. Forget if it's 80,000, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it simply is. So in a way, it's kind of like it is a living system. It is a living relational system, right? And it's just like, they that old saying, like, the greatest mysteries, right? Like, is the water to a fish and air to a bird and a person to themselves.
Yeah.
You could even say that at the level of relational systems, like a whole culture. It's like, it is actually beyond our ability to comprehend and control it.
Yeah.
And we don't need to. Actually, what we need is like, what is the sufficient degree of awareness and our ability to take like the tensions that are really present and like transform those tensions into meaningful change so that now we're relating in a way that is better for the overall health of our relationship.
Well, and it sounds like you're also helping companies and organizations make a hierarchical distinction between what's necessary to resolve and what is just kind of like, yeah, this kind of shit happens. There's always going to be background chatter. You don't not have the meeting because of A, but do not have the meeting if it's B.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah.
Like, if me and my co-founder, if I'm like, man, he's a fucking asshole, and I'm in a major conflict with him, we probably shouldn't have a meeting about our round C. He and I should probably sit down and get our communication squared away.
Exactly. Totally. Totally. I mean, this kind of goal orientation, I would say, is one of the gifts of doing relational work in organizations, right? Like, over there, if anything, they're kind of erring towards like, well, no, we don't want people wasting too much time talking about their feelings because we want them to kind of get back to work and get shit done. Right. And it's like, that's valid. That makes a lot of sense to me. Right.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
So when
just like in a personal relationship, we don't want to be processing all the time because we should actually be having a relationship.
Exactly. But there's more of a temptation to go there, especially in certain, these subcultures we're talking about, like Boulder and California, right? Like, hey, to do that more and think that this is good for us to keep doing it.
And this would be like this would be like the B Corp, the nonprofit, where they might get a little lost in the cultural processing.
Yes, they might do that, and that ends up standing in the way of goals. So you're kind of like, if I'm bringing up a tension with you and we work together, Keith, like the point of us like processing is not for me to get to the bottom of my childhood wounding or you too or anything like that. It's kind of like, okay, it's gonna cash out into like something like a request or a new ongoing expectation, or maybe we discovered a new safe word. Can we use this as a safe word now, or whatever? You're kind of like, hey, okay, can you just remember, like, before you send out the thing to the team about the thing that I'm working on, can you just like run that by me first?
What's the goal? So is it like, what's the goal of the conflict resolution? Is it kind of like helping us identify, great, you're going to work on resolving the conflict. Why?
Right. I mean, I would say when you're looking at things from that relational point of view, from the vase perspective, it cashes out in what you say and what you do. What are we going to say and do based off of this process that we just did?
Right.
And like, that's different. It's kind of like, oh, right. Oh, my healing from that wounding is incomplete. It's like, yeah, but what we're not going to say and do is like spend however much time you need every week so I, as your manager, can help you get to the bottom of your childhood trauma. I mean, that sort of sounds weird, right? You're like, no. We just need to like figure out how we can change what we say and do such that this snag that we keep hitting
so we can do the tango. Yeah.
Right.
So if it's a relationship, it's so we can do the tango if that's what you and I agree that we want in our relationship.
Right.
And if it's a company, it's so we can, make more widgets. And if it's a nonprofit, it's so we can do better good in the world, right? And if it's a B Corp, right? And onward you go. But what I'm hearing you say is that part of what you do when you coach companies and individuals through this is you help them keep an eye on the prize. Why are you doing it? Right? What's the goal here? Right? Is it tango or is it softball? What do you want? And it's no problem if you guys want to do softball together. That's great. I can help you if you're in agreement. That's the goal. Softball away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is a sweet spot. I can totally imagine certain business leaders are just pretty ruthless and they're just like, just fire them. Just like, and they keep filling it. It's like a revolving door, whatever. We don't care. We don't talk about our feelings here at all because it's like, it's black and white. Talking about your feelings means you're just doing this stupid green thing, right? And then you maybe go way over here and I've been in like mirror world organizations, like transformational organizations where it was like business meeting, agenda item number 1. I have in this like this. I have a feeling about this. I have a feeling about the way you expressed your feelings about this. Oh, now I'm crying. And then you're like, we never, and like 90 minutes later, we're processing our emotions about each other. And it's like, what was agenda item number 1? I don't remember. Okay, we can remember. Did we come to a conclusion about what we're doing about that agenda item? No. Do we ever even start agenda item number 2? No. Right. And you're like, well, see? Right. Like, that's why we don't do that. Right. It makes sense. But the sweet spot to me is like processing a relational tension, especially in the context of the organization, should result in what are you and I going to do and say that maybe is different than we did before that would help us achieve our joint purpose together more effectively.
Right. I love it. I love it because you're doing the exact same thing with individuals as you're doing for companies. It's really no different. It's just it's a matter of scale and nuance. It's more obvious in a relationship. It's maybe less obvious in a company or depending on the company, but either way, you have to have, again, I guess we're really talking about these polarities, right? We're sort of moving back and forth between these two poles, not doing one or the other exclusively.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I happen to have certain beliefs about like the kind of workplaces that I think are healthy or that people would enjoy doing. And like, it's not just the goal or the strategy or the profit or whatever, the service or the widget, the product or the service that we're trying to create. It's actually how we're doing it. Like part of it is, one analogy I do is like, if you play like a pickup sports, like a neighborhood basketball game or something like, you're like, we're getting together. We don't have any referees. We're not playing in a league, right? We want to have a good time, right? And part of having a good time is like, yeah, I'm trying to beat you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want my team to win, so I'm going to play hard to get my team to win. But there is just like okay, but what about that guy who just comes in to like, the pickup game and he's just like extra ruthless and extra just like kind of like, you're kind of like, I like that he plays hard, but I kind of don't want to play with him again because it's almost like he's just taking this a little too seriously, right? We're here to have a good time, right? And that's the how, right? It's the idea of the infinite game. We're playing to win this match, but we are also want to play, you could say, with sportsmanlike conduct that would have us want to play again.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
And of course, the same in relationship. What do you want? Well, I want to be in a loving, supportive partnership. What do you want, honey? I want to be in a loving, supportive partnership. Okay. So that's the game we're playing.
Right.
Is what we're doing now supporting that outcome.
Yes, or even supporting other future outcomes. Hey, can we sprinkle in like, and we travel the world together,
right?
Or we have kids together.
Right.
It's kind of like the relational, adding this relational dimension, which is how we do this, plants the seed for how we would do something else in the future, and like paying attention to how we do it is important for kind of like, you know, repeat performances. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like, let's
Right,
get back
right,
together again. Let's do
right,
another thing.
right.
Let's do another project,
Yeah,
right? The company dissolves. It fails. Your startup fails, right? And people kind of go scurry off into their own whatever. And you kind of see, oh, those people just don't talk to each other anymore. But these people went off and started another company. Why? Because like something about how they work together felt good enough for them to want to do it again.
yeah,
Right. So like you show up as a good relational leader, as somebody who like, you know, is paying attention to how, not just what your goals are, right? Like how you're doing it. Hey, chances are you're going to make people will be like, hey man, you want to come be, I know that thing didn't work out, but we're doing another thing. You want to
yeah,
be a part of it?
yeah.
Versus like, I didn't hear from those people again. Like,
Well, right, because
where did
the how could be, you know, good to go back to couples too. The how could be, you know, we maintain our union at pretty much any cost, right? Like I know some couples that are, you know, fear is the how,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like, you know, like they basically very much control each other because it's like if you get out of my view at all creates fear, and that's the mutual. But there's mutual agreement, right? Wouldn't work for me. But if the how is in agreement, then the what lines up very naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes if we dip back into interpersonal or romantic relationships briefly, like there's like this one school of thought, and we can say it's like the radical honesty or the authentic relating school of thought, which is just like, you know, if it's true for you or if it's an experience you're having, then you should reveal it. Right. And you know, maybe I'm kind of like, oh man, I don't know if I can be with you if this is what's happening. Right. And well, that's a thought I'm having. I'm having that thought. So I'm going to share that thought in order to be transparent. But then if you go over to the secure attachment school of thought says like, you know, in order to resolve whatever the current conflict is, don't say anything that could threaten
The relationship,
even
if it seems true.
Even if that thought is, it is actually saying like, you have the thought, oh, what if this means we can't be together?
Right.
It literally says like, do not say that.
Right. Right.
To foster secure attachment that is necessary to resolve this conflict, you need to edit yourself to not say that.
Right. Yeah, I've had a few conversations with people in the radical honesty camp, and it does feel like emotional vomiting. You know, it's like every time I've had to be like, I'm sorry, but I need to ask you to stop because I'm not your therapist. And I'm actually unwilling to sit here and receive your truth in the way you're delivering to me. So, you know, off you go. Off to be radically honest with. That's my radical truth. You know, shut the fuck up.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that creating that invitation and the consent, like you mentioned, to have a conversation about what's going on between us. And this is something I just hammer it over and over again. It's like, you need to look at it from that relational point of view. Think about the relational entity.
Right.
I am wanting to bring this up because I believe it would serve me and you and our relationship in this way. And if I can't think of something good for you and the relationship, that like, and if you're just in the school of thoughts, I should just say whatever because I'm feeling it, or it gives you an excuse to not be discerning. The discerning thing is to include all three parts and be like, that should be the purpose of my communication.
Right.
And if I can't find that purpose, then I should just shut up and not say it, or wait till I can, and then I can say it.
That's a really good way of saying it, a very sophisticated way of saying it, which is that if I'm in a radical honesty camp, I've collapsed the relationship to my pole entirely. So not only is there no us, there's no person sitting across from me, because in essence, all I care about is my truth.
Yes.
Now, if I'm with someone and she also wants to do that, and we're in agreement, and that's the we space we want to create, well, then it's a little different, right?
Yeah.
Then who are we to judge?
Yeah. I mean, it might be pretty explosive and fairly short-lived.
Sure might.
Be a lot of fun. Right. Yeah. It'll be fun. Woo!
Interesting. All right. So any kind of final thoughts on this? We have covered a pretty broad amount of territory here.
I mean, I love talking about it.
Yeah, I know. We can talk about this all day.
Yeah. You know, I hope I offered people like a little bit of something to sink their teeth into in terms of like, how to get that relational centered point of view, the relationship centered point of view as actually a source of discernment in terms of, how you process the tensions, right? It's like, you don't want to not process them and you don't want to over process them.
Right.
But then, okay, then how do I discern?
Right.
The way that you discern is centering on the relationship itself as a perspective. And that's that's my main takeaway I want people to get from our talk today, to reiterate it. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Well, if people want to learn more about MetaRelating and what you offer, where might they find more?
Go to MetaRelating.com. You can sign up for the email list. I also have like a free ebook there. If you hit the get started button at the top, you can go check that out. You can read about me. I got a blog. I got a podcast. There's all kinds of resources on there that are free. And I do free events every month, I do sort of spot coaching where I apply this approach.
Cool.
You want to show up to
you work with individuals, couples, companies, the whole gambit.
Yeah. I've worked with siblings. I've worked with executives. I've worked with teams. Yeah. Education and coaching. I do both. I like people to kind of understand it, not for just me to come and do something magical and then they go, woo, I want them to have a takeaway that they can apply without me.
Yeah. So you're trying to train them to use this technology so that it actually works.
Yeah. Yep. That's me.
Great. And so again, it's MetaRelating.com.
Yep.
And just the way it sounds, MATA relating.
Yep.
Great.
No dashes, just MetaRelating as one made up word.
All right, beautiful. Awesome, man. Well, I enjoyed the conversation. It was great seeing you and getting into it and hearing about your sort of latest ventures.
Thanks, man. Appreciate being here.
Okay, bye for now. Thanks, everybody.